The Russian envoy, Viktor Chernomyrdin, says he's made solid progress during talks in Belgrade with the Yugoslav president Slobodan Milosevic over trying to end the conflict in Kosovo. He is now planning to visit London and Paris next week. Mr. Chernomyrdin's visit to Belgrade coincided with the heaviest night of bombing so far on the Yugoslav capital. John Simpson is in Belgrade. His report has been seen by Serbian officials.
Last night, the bombing was bad here. The military headquarters was hit, and so were other targets associated with the military and the police. Yet again, the state television service was knocked off the air for a few hours. To cap it all, there was even a small earthquake in the city once the air attacks had stopped. As more bombs and missiles hit Belgrade, some are inevitably going astray. This, for instance, used to be a small but profitable restaurant with the owners living upstairs. Last night, a bomb or a missile went off target, hit it, and failed to explode. The missile still in there, in the ruins. Because there was no explosion, no one was killed, but the son of the family, who had been up late studying for his exams, was injured. We know exactly what time the missile landed. Now, Dušanka Filipović sits outside with all that's left of her house, her business, and her life. A few household items, a bit of furniture, and some books, one by Ernest Hemingway. What are you going to do now? Where are you going to spend tonight, for instance?
With our family, where else? This is all we have. This is where our children grew up, here, in this house that's now been destroyed. I never in my wildest dreams thought something like this would happen. Did we deserve this? I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's far too horrible.
At the end of the street, a visitor has arrived, as if from another world. The Reverend Jesse Jackson from the United States, here to try to get the 3 American prisoners of war released and to do, if he can, a little freelance peace negotiation.
We must find a way out. This should not be winners and losers. These are losers and losers. Winning is a political settlement. Winning is diplomacy.
You get the impression from this perspective that the bombing of Belgrade is intensifying now. As the diplomatic efforts are going on, so NATO wants to put the pressure on President Milosevic to accept what's on offer. And today, Viktor Chernomyrdin, the Russian peace negotiator, arrived here with what he called concrete proposals, presumably to do with getting agreement on a UN peacekeeping force for Kosovo, which would include a clear involvement for NATO. Maybe it's still too early for a deal. NATO may have to carry on for a while until the Serbian side is ready to talk.
Refugees from Kosovo streaming into Albania have been speaking about what appears to be the largest mass killing by Serb forces so far. The United Nations Refugee Agency has said there's sufficient verbal evidence for the killings to be described as a massacre. Latest reports suggest that up to 200 people near the village of Meja in southwest Kosovo have been killed. Jeremy Bowen has been speaking to refugees in Kukes in Albania.
The women of the Zaberi family are haunted by the time they spent in Meja. On Tuesday morning, about 10 o'clock, their tractor and about 60 others were stopped by hundreds of Serb troops. For 15 minutes they waited while the Serbs worked their way along the line, ordering the men to get out. Then Safeta, 32 years old with 4 children, watched the Serbs take her husband, Gani. They told him twice to get out, but he just stared at them. The 3rd time they hit him with a rifle. He looked at his children and he didn't say anything, and then they took him. Her sister-in-law, Aphrodita. From our tractor there were 10, our men and cousins. From the whole convoy they took about 300. They pushed them into a place that was like a little valley. Then we couldn't see them anymore. Of course, it isn't possible independently to confirm what eyewitnesses in these camps say. But the same stories, the same details, emerge from very different people. These refugees arrived here on Wednesday afternoon. They'd passed through Meja 6 or 7 hours after the first column of tractors had been stopped. The woman with the suitcase said the week before the Serbs had been threatening reprisals for the killing of 4 paramilitary policemen. The Salihu family arrived in Mare on foot at about 5 on Tuesday afternoon, 6 or 7 hours after the other group. They say they saw a big pile of bodies, perhaps 300 of them, and hundreds of other men still alive, sitting in lines. They were on their own, only 11 people, but the Serbs took Zizi Salihu's husband and his cousin. They'd already killed a big group. The only reason they took our men was to kill them too. 5 minutes after we left, we heard shooting. It went on for 10 to 15 minutes non-stop. After talking to the refugees, the UN called what happened in Mare the worst massacre they've heard about so far. We've spoken to more than a dozen people who were in Mare. The UN and war crimes investigators have interviewed many more. The full story of what happened there won't come out until the end of the war, and perhaps not even then. Safeta Zaberi is trying to hope that somehow her husband escaped, but loneliness and fear are tearing at her.
What started with a few nighttime raids against military targets has become round-the-clock bombing. But what else now? Tony Blair made it clear in Washington last weekend that if ground troops are needed, then so be it. Milosevic, he keeps saying, can have no veto over NATO actions. Other members of NATO take a different view. Greece will not allow an invasion to be mounted from its soil, and the Americans appear not to want it either. The House of Representatives has refused to allow President Clinton to spend the money that would be needed for the deployment of ground troops in Kosovo unless Clinton gets congressional approval first. The Democratic Representative Lloyd Doggett from Texas went further.
There should have been no military action in the Balkans, not bombing, not troops, not any military action until this Congress had given it approval. The Constitution prescribes that no president should commit the lives of our youth and the billions of our taxpayers in non-emergency situations like this without involvement of the American people through their representatives in this House.